A lonely millionaire hires a homeless pianist to bear his heir, but their business deal births more than expected. Triplets and a love neither planned. As family feuds and past betrayals collide, will their newfound happiness endure? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The rain poured down on Manhattan's busy streets as Alex Sterling's black limousine stopped at a red light. At 45, Alex had everything money could buy. A mansion on the Upper East Side, a successful business empire, and more money than he could spend in 10 lifetimes. But something was missing, and he knew exactly what it was. He needed an heir. Alex loosened his silk tie and looked out the window. That's when he heard it. Beautiful piano music cutting through the sound of rain and traffic. On the street corner stood a young black woman playing a beat-up keyboard. She had a tattered piano bag on her back, but her music was incredible. "Stop the car," Alex ordered his driver. "But sir, we're in the middle of—" "I said stop!" Alex's voice left. No room for argument. The driver pulled over and Alex grabbed his umbrella. The woman's fingers danced across the keys, playing a melody so beautiful it made his chest hurt. He hadn't felt anything like this since before his second divorce 3 years ago. "That's quite impressive," he said, holding his umbrella over her. The woman looked up, startled. "Thank you," she said quietly, her hands falling still on the keys. "I'm just trying to earn enough for a place to stay tonight." "What's your name?" Trinity Washington." Alex studied her. She was younger than he'd first thought, probably in her late 20s. Despite her shabby clothes and obvious exhaustion, she carried herself with dignity. "I have a business proposition for you, Miss Washington." Trinity's eyes narrowed with suspicion. "I'm not that kind of woman, Mr. Sterling." "Alex Sterling." "And no, that's not what I'm suggesting." He pulled out his business card and handed it to her. "I'm looking for someone to carry my child. In exchange, I'll provide financial security, enough to restart your life and pursue whatever dreams brought you to New York in the first place." Trinity stared at the card, then back at Alex. "You're joking." "I never joke about business. $5 million, plus living expenses during the pregnancy. All I ask is discretion and that you leave the country afterward." Thunder crashed overhead, and the rain came down harder. Trinity's hands shook as she held the card. "Why me?" she asked. "Because you have talent and strength. I've been watching various candidates, but something about you—" Alex paused. "Let's just say I trust my instincts in business." Trinity laughed bitterly. "So I'd be just another business deal?" "A mutually beneficial arrangement. Nothing more, nothing less." Alex pulled out another card. "This is my lawyer's number. Think about it. Call within 48 hours if you're interested." He turned and walked back to his limo, leaving Trinity standing in the rain with his card clutched in her hand. 2 days later, Trinity sat in the gleaming office of James Parker, Alex's lawyer. The contrast between her worn clothes and the expensive leather chairs made her uncomfortable, but she forced herself to sit up straight. "The terms are simple," James explained, his kind eyes a surprise in his sharp-featured face. "You'll move into Mr. Sterling's guest house immediately. All medical expenses covered. $5 million deposited in an offshore account after delivery. Complete confidentiality required." "And I have to leave the country?" Trinity asked. "Those are Mr. Sterling's terms. He's had some unfortunate experiences with past relationships." Trinity thought about her dreams of becoming a concert pianist, crushed by racism and poverty. With $5 million, she could study anywhere in the world. Start fresh. "Where do I sign?" The next morning, Trinity stood at the gates of Alex's mansion with her keyboard and tattered bag, everything she owned in the world. As the gates opened, she wondered if she was making the biggest mistake of her life. Alex met her in the marble foyer, looking exactly like the businessman he was in his perfectly tailored suit. "Welcome to your new home," he said formally. "Mrs. Rodriguez will show you to the guest house." As Trinity followed the housekeeper across the manicured lawn, she heard whispers from other staff members. She caught words like gold digger and scandal, but held her head high. The guest house was bigger than any apartment she'd ever lived in. As she set her keyboard down in the living room, Trinity's hands trembled. "What have I gotten myself into?" she whispered to herself. But there was no turning back now. The contract was signed. The deal was done. Trinity Washington, homeless street musician, was now carrying the heir to the Sterling fortune, or at least she would be soon. Little did she know that this business arrangement would change not only her life but Alex's too. in ways neither of them could possibly imagine. Trinity's first week in the guest house felt like living in a dream. Every morning, she woke up in a real bed instead of a shelter cot. The kitchen was always stocked with food, and for the first time in years, she didn't have to worry about where her next meal would come from. But not everything was perfect. The doctor's appointments were the worst. Dr. Patricia Morgan, Alex's personal physician, barely looked Trinity in the eye during their first meeting. "Mr. Sterling wants daily reports on your health," Dr. Morgan said coldly. "And of course, we'll need extensive testing before we begin the procedure." Trinity gripped the arms of her chair. "What kind of testing?" "Everything. We need to ensure you're suitable." The way Dr. Morgan said it made Trinity feel like a breeding horse being examined for sale. Back at the guest house, Trinity found comfort in her music. She practiced for hours on her old keyboard, losing herself in the melodies that had kept her going through the hardest times. One evening, as she played Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, she noticed Alex standing in the doorway. "That's beautiful," he said, his usual businesslike mask softening slightly. "You're classically trained." Trinity's fingers stilled on the keys. "Juilliard, for 2 years, before I ran out of money." Alex frowned. "Juilliard? Then how did you end up on the street?" Trinity gave a bitter laugh. "Being talented isn't enough when you're black and poor in classical music. The scholarships dried up and my family couldn't help. Then my mum got sick, and whatever money I had went to her medical bills." Something flickered in Alex's eyes. Recognition, maybe even pain, but it disappeared as quickly as it came. "There's a baby grand in the main house," he said abruptly. "How you should use it. That keyboard doesn't do your talent justice." Before Trinity could respond, he was gone. The next day, James Parker, Alex's lawyer, stopped by the guest house. Unlike the others, James always treated Trinity with respect. "How are you settling in?" he asked, his warm brown eyes showing genuine concern. "It's different," Trinity admitted. "Sometimes I feel like an exhibit in a zoo. The staff whispers about me, and Alex's sister came by yesterday just to glare at me through the window." James sighed. "Alexandra Sterling isn't known for her warmth, but don't let her or anyone else make you feel unwelcome. You're here because Alex chose you." "For my uterus, you mean?" Trinity said sharply. "Is that what you think?" James leaned forward. "Alex could have chosen anyone. Models, actresses, women from his own social circle, but he chose you. I've known him for 15 years and he never does anything without a reason." Before Trinity could puzzle out what that meant, her phone buzzed. It was Dr. Morgan's office. "Congratulations," the nurse said. "All your tests came back perfect. We can schedule the procedure for next week." Trinity's hand trembled as she hung up the phone. Next week, in 7 days, she would be carrying Alex Sterling's baby. Her hand drifted to her flat stomach. "Having second thoughts?" James asked, gently. "No," Trinity said firmly. "I made a deal. I'll see it through." That night, unable to sleep, Trinity went to the main house to look at the baby grand piano Alex had mentioned. The house was dark and quiet. She found the piano in a large room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Her fingers had barely touched the keys when a voice behind her made her jump. "You should cover the keys after playing." Alex stood in the doorway, wearing pajama pants and a t-shirt. Without his usual suit, he looked almost human. "I'm sorry. I couldn't." "Sleep or play something," he interrupted. Trinity hesitated, then began to play. Not classical this time, but a gospel song her grandmother used to sing. The rich notes filled the room, and Trinity closed her eyes, letting the music flow through her. When she finished, she opened her eyes to find Alex, staring at her with an expression she'd never seen before. "My mother used to play," he said quietly. "Before she died, I was 12. Before Trinity could respond, his walls slammed back up. "Use the piano whenever you want," he said briskly. "Just remember to cover it when you're done." As his footsteps faded away, Trinity sat in the darkness, her fingers still resting on the keys. For the first time, she wondered if there might be more to Alex Sterling than his cold business exterior, but she couldn't afford to think that way. This was just business. In 9 months, she would take the money and disappear. No complications, no feelings, if only it were that simple. The key. Day of the procedure arrived bright and clear. Trinity sat in Dr. Morgan's waiting room, trying to calm her racing heart. Alex was there too, sitting across from her and checking emails on his phone, as if this were just another business meeting. "Mr. Sterling?" Dr. Morgan appeared in the doorway. We've received the results from the final blood tests and there's something we need to discuss in private. Trinity watched them disappear into Dr. Morgan's office, her stomach churning. Through the door, she could hear raised voices. Absolutely not, Alex's voice carried clearly. It's too risky. Mr. Sterling, the chances of multiple births are higher with this procedure. We should consider... I said no. Proceed as planned. When they emerged, Dr. Morgan looked frustrated, and Alex's jaw was set in a hard line. Neither of them would meet Trinity's eyes. Is everything okay? She asked. Fine, Alex snapped. Let's get this over with. The procedure itself was quick. As Trinity lay on the examination table afterward, Dr. Morgan finally showed a hint of kindness. Rest here for an hour, she said softly. And, Trinity, take care of yourself. This might be harder than you expect. 2 weeks later, Trinity sat in the same office, gripping the arms of her chair as Dr. Morgan smiled. Congratulations, she said. You're pregnant. Trinity's hand flew to her stomach. Pregnant. Actually pregnant. With Alex Sterling's baby. Alex, sitting beside her, remained stone-faced. Good. Send me the monitoring schedule. I have a meeting. He strode out without even looking at Trinity. That evening, Alexandra Sterling, Alex's sister, showed up unannounced at the guest house. She was tall and elegant like her brother, but her eyes were cold as ice. Let me make something clear, Alexandra said, brushing past Trinity into the living room. You may be carrying my brother's child, but that doesn't make you family. Take the money and disappear as agreed. Don't get any ideas about sticking around. Trinity lifted her chin. I signed a contract, Ms. Sterling. I intend to honor it. See that you do. Alexandra's eyes landed on the piano music scattered across the coffee table. Playing house already? How pathetic. After she left, Trinity ran to the bathroom and threw up. Morning sickness, she told herself. Just morning sickness, not anger or hurt or fear. James Parker found her later that night at the baby grand, playing furiously. Alexandra paid you a visit, I hear, he said. Trinity's fingers stumbled on the keys. News travels fast. The staff talks. James sat beside her on the bench. Don't let her get to you. Alexandra's just protective of Alex, especially after what happened with his last marriage. What did happen? Trinity asked before she could stop herself. James hesitated. It's not my story to tell, but let's just say money changes people, or reveals who they really are. Is that why he's so... Trinity gestured vaguely. Cold? Distant? James smiled sadly. Alex learned early that emotions are expensive. His father taught him that. The great Richard Sterling never approved of anything Alex did. Even now, 10 years after his death, Alex is still trying to prove himself. Trinity thought about that as she played, her fingers finding a gentle melody. You care about him, she observed. He's my best friend. James's voice was quiet, even if he'd never admit to having one. The next morning, Trinity woke to find a gift-wrapped package outside her door. Inside was a leather-bound book of piano music, classical pieces arranged for gospel piano. The note read simply, for practice, A.S. Trinity traced the elegant binding. Maybe there was hope for Alex Sterling after all, but any warmth she felt vanished at breakfast. As she ate, she overheard two maids talking in the kitchen. Can you believe Mr. Sterling's having a baby with someone like her? I heard she was homeless, probably planned the whole thing. Well, she'd better not get too comfortable. Remember what happened to the last Mrs. Sterling? Trinity's toast turned to ashes in her mouth. She fled back to the guest house fighting tears. That afternoon she had her first real bout of morning sickness. As she knelt in the bathroom, a familiar voice called through the door. Trinity? Mrs. Rodriguez said you were ill. It was Alex. I'm fine, she managed. No, you're not. I'm coming in. Before she could protest, Alex was there, holding back her hair as she retched. When she finished, he handed her a glass of water. Thank you, she whispered. It's my child making you sick, he said gruffly. Least I can do is help. Their eyes met in the mirror, and for a moment, something sparked between them. Then Alex stepped back, straightening his tie. I'll have Mrs. Rodriguez bring you some ginger tea. It helped my mother when she was pregnant with Alexandra. He was gone before Trinity could respond. Alone in the bathroom, Trinity pressed her hands to her still flat stomach. Your daddy's a complicated man, little one, she whispered, but I think there might be a heart under all that ice after all. She had no way of knowing that at that very moment, Alex stood outside her door, His hand raised to knock again, struggling with feelings he couldn't explain and didn't want to face. 3 months passed, and Trinity's morning sickness finally began to ease. Her first trimester checkup was scheduled for a Monday morning, and to her surprise, Alex insisted on being there. "It's my child," he said simply when she questioned him. "I should be present." Trinity lay on the examination table as Dr. Morgan moved the ultrasound wand across her slightly rounded belly. The room was quiet except for the steady whoosh-whoosh of the heartbeat, but then Dr. Morgan frowned. She moved the wand again, pressing harder. "Is something wrong?" Trinity asked, fear creeping into her voice. "No, nothing's wrong," Dr. Morgan said slowly. "But, Mr. Sterling, do you remember our discussion before the procedure about the possibility of multiple births?" Alex's face went pale. "What are you saying?" Dr. Morgan turned the screen so they could both see it clearly. "Congratulations. You're having triplets," Trinity's world spun. "Triplets. 3 healthy fetuses," Dr. Morgan confirmed. "This is what I was concerned about. The fertility treatment we used increased the chances of multiple births. 3 babies." Alex's voice was strangled. "That wasn't the plan. That wasn't the deal." He stormed out of the room, leaving Trinity alone with Dr. Morgan. "I'm so sorry," Dr. Morgan said, genuine sympathy in her voice for the first time. "He'll come around. This is just a shock." But Trinity wasn't so sure. 3 babies meant 3 times the complications, 3 times the risk. Would Alex try to end their agreement? She found him in the hospital parking lot, pacing beside his car. "Mr. Sterling," she called out. "Alex." He spun to face her, his expression wild. "This changes everything. The contract was for 1 child." "They're already here," Trinity said, placing a hand on her stomach. "All 3 of them, your children." "I can't." Alex ran a hand through his hair. "I need time to think." He drove away, leaving Trinity standing alone in the parking lot. James, who had been waiting in his own car, immediately came to her side. "What happened?" he asked. "Alex just tore out of here like the devil was chasing him." Trinity told him about the triplets. To her surprise, James started laughing. "Oh, this is perfect," he said. "Alex Sterling, who plans everything down to the minute, is getting triple the surprise. Maybe God does have a sense of humor." Despite herself, Trinity smiled. "He's not happy. He's scared," James corrected. "Alex hates anything he can't control. Come on, I'll drive you home." But when they arrived at the Sterling estate, they found Alexandra waiting on the front steps. "3 babies?" she screeched. "How are you trying to ruin him? Was this your plan all along?" "Mrs. Sterling," James stepped between them, "this isn't helping." "Stay out of this, James." Alexandra jabbed a finger at Trinity. "I knew you were trouble the moment Alex brought you. Here, just like that gold digger Miranda." "Who's Miranda?" Trinity asked. "His second wife," James said quietly. She almost destroyed him," Alexandra cut in. "And now you're trying to do the same thing. 3 babies. The press will have a field day." As if on cue, Trinity's phone buzzed with a news alert. Someone at the hospital must have leaked the story. The headline read, "Sterling Heir Scandal, Homeless Surrogate Carrying Triplets." Trinity felt sick. She pushed past Alexandra and ran to the guest house, James calling after her. Inside, she collapsed on the couch, tears finally falling. What was she going to do? Alex hadn't wanted this. The contract didn't cover this. Would he try to end the pregnancy? Would he force her to leave? The piano sat silent in the corner, offering no comfort today. Hours passed. The sun set. Trinity's phone kept buzzing with calls from reporters, but she ignored them all. At midnight, there was a knock at her door. She opened it to find Alex standing there, looking more disheveled than she'd ever seen him. "May I come in?" he asked formally, as if this were any other business meeting. Trinity stepped aside. Alex walked to the window and stood there, his back to her for a long moment. "I've been thinking," he finally said, "about what my father would say if he could see me now." Trinity stayed silent, her heart pounding. "He would say I'm a fool," Alex continued, "that I've lost control of the situation, that I'm risking the Sterling name and fortune." He turned to face her. "But for the first time in my life, I don't care what he would think." "What are you saying?" Trinity whispered. "I'm saying," Alex took a deep breath, "I'm saying these are my children, all 3 of them, and I'll deal with whatever complications that brings." Relief flooded through Trinity. But Alex wasn't finished. "The contract will need to be modified," he said. "The compensation increased to reflect the change in circumstances, and we'll need to discuss additional medical precautions for a multiple birth." Always business, Trinity thought. But she could see something else in his eyes now. Fear, yes, but also something that looked almost like hope. "There's one more thing," Alex added, pulling an envelope from his pocket. "I had James draw this up tonight." Trinity opened it and gasped. It was a revised contract, but not just for increased payment. This one removed the requirement for her to leave the country after the birth. "The children will need their mother," Alex said quietly, "if you want to stay." Before Trinity could respond, a wave of dizziness hit her. She stumbled and Alex caught her arm. "Are you all right?" he asked, real concern in his voice. "Just tired," she said. "It's been a long day." Alex helped her to the couch, his touch surprisingly gentle. As she sat down, she felt it, the first tiny flutter of movement in her belly. Without thinking, she grabbed Alex's hand and pressed it to the spot. His eyes widened as he felt the subtle movement. "Is that your babies?" Trinity whispered. "Our babies." For the first time since she'd met him, Alex Sterling smiled, a real, genuine smile that transformed his whole face. Neither of them noticed Alexandra watching through the window, her face dark with anger as she dialed a familiar number. "Miranda, it's Alexandra. We need to talk about my brother." The next few weeks brought big changes to the Sterling estate. Trinity's baby bump grew more noticeable, and Alex insisted she move into the main house. "The guest house is too far. If you need help," he said, trying to sound businesslike, "it's just practical." But Trinity noticed other changes too. Fresh flowers appeared in her room every morning. Her favorite foods showed up in the kitchen, and sometimes, late at night, she'd catch Alex watching her play the piano with an expression that definitely wasn't businesslike. Everything seemed perfect until the day Miranda Sterling walked through the front door. Trinity was practicing at the baby grand when she heard the commotion in the foyer. A tall, stunning woman with perfect blonde hair and designer clothes stood there, her red lips curved in a cold smile. "Really, Alex?" Miranda's voice dripped with disdain. "When Alexandra told me about your little breeding experiment, I could hardly believe it. But seeing it in person," she looked Trinity up and down. "How desperate have you become?" Alex appeared from his study, his face white with anger. "What are you doing here, Miranda?" "Can't a woman visit her husband?" Miranda purred. Trinity's heart stopped. "Husband? Oh, didn't he tell you?" Miranda's smile widened. "Our divorce was never finalized. Technically, I'm still Mrs. Sterling." The room spun. Trinity grabbed the piano for support. "That's a lie," Alex growled. "The papers were filed 3 years ago." "Filed, yes, but never processed." Miranda pulled out a stack of documents. "Your lawyer can confirm it. Isn't that right, James?" James, who had just walked in, looked stricken. "Alex, I should have caught this. The papers were submitted, but there was a technical error." Miranda's lawyer found a loophole. "Which means," Miranda continued sweetly, "that any children born while we're still legally married are presumed to be mine." Legally speaking. Trinity felt sick. The babies chose that moment to kick hard, as if they sensed her distress. "This is ridiculous," Alex snapped. "I'll have it fixed immediately." "Of course you will, darling, but these things take time." Miranda walked over to Trinity. "And time is something our little surrogate doesn't have much of, is she? 4 months left, I hear. Triplets are so risky. Get out." Alex's voice was deadly quiet. Now, is that any way to talk to your wife?" Miranda turned to Trinity. "A word of advice, dear. Don't get too comfortable. Alex has a habit of making promises he can't keep." Trinity couldn't take any more. She fled upstairs to her room, tears blinding her. Behind her, she could hear Alex and Miranda arguing. James found her there an hour later, curled up on her bed. "I'm so sorry," he said, sitting beside her. "I should have double-checked everything." "Did you know?" Trinity asked. "About Miranda? I knew she was trouble. But this?" James shook his head. "She almost bankrupted him last time, trying to take control of the company. Alex's father had just died and she saw her chance. That's why Alex is so closed off? Protected," James corrected. "But you're changing that. I've never seen him like he is with you." Before Trinity could respond, Alex appeared in a doorway. "James, I need you to fix this, whatever it takes." "Already on it." James squeezed Trinity's hand and left. Alex stood awkwardly in the doorway. "I should have told you about Miranda." "Yes, you should have." Trinity's voice shook. "What happens now?" "Nothing happens. This changes nothing." Alex moved closer. "Those are my children you're carrying. Our children. But if she's legally your wife, she won't be for long." Alex sat on the bed. Trinity, look at me. I won't let her hurt you or the babies. Why didn't the divorce go through? Trinity asked. Alex was quiet for a long moment. Because I wasn't paying attention. After what she did to the company, I just wanted it over. I let James handle everything. I should have checked. Like you're checking everything with me. The words came out bitter. That's different. Alex's hand found hers. You're different. The babies kicked again, and Trinity automatically moved his hand to feel it. The wonder on his face made her heart ache. Alex, she whispered, what are we doing? I don't know, he admitted. But I do know that Miranda won't win. Not this time. Later that night, Trinity couldn't sleep. She went downstairs to play the piano, but stopped when she heard voices from Alex's study. You're a fool, Alex. It was Alexandra. Miranda's right. You've lost control. First the triplets, now this. Father would be ashamed. Father's dead, Alex replied. And for the first time, I'm glad he is, because he would never understand what these babies mean to me, what Trinity means to me. Trinity's heart skipped a beat. Oh, God, Alexandra gasped. You're in love with her. There was a long silence. Get out, Alexandra, Alex finally said. And if you ever work with Miranda against me again, you're no longer my sister. Trinity crept back upstairs, her mind spinning. Love? That wasn't part of the deal. That wasn't part of the plan. But as she lay in bed, feeling her babies move, she had to admit that nothing about this was going according to plan anymore. In her own bed across town, Miranda Sterling smiled as she reviewed her legal strategy. Soon she would have everything, the Sterling name, the fortune, and 3 heirs to control it all. Sleep well. Alex, she whispered, the real game is just beginning. The next few weeks turned into a nightmare. Miranda seemed to be everywhere, at doctor's appointments, charity events, even showing up unannounced at the mansion. She played the part of the wronged wife perfectly, and the press ate it up. Sterling heir scandal deepens, wife fights for. Right to unborn triplets. Trinity saw the headlines everywhere she went. At 6 months pregnant, she could no longer hide her condition, and the paparazzi followed her constantly. Don't they have anything better to write about? She asked. One morning, tossing aside another newspaper. Apparently not, Alex growled. He looked exhausted. The legal battle with Miranda was taking its toll on him. James burst into the breakfast room, his usually neat appearance disheveled. We have a problem. Miranda's filed for an injunction. She wants Trinity barred from leaving the state until custody is determined. She can't do that, Trinity protested. She can and she has. James ran a hand through his hair. The hearing is next week. Alex's coffee cup shattered in his grip. This has gone too far. Get me everything you have on Miranda, everything. Alex, James warned, if you're thinking what I think you're thinking, I'll just do it. That night, Trinity couldn't sleep. The babies were especially active, kicking and moving constantly. She waddled down to the piano room, hoping music would soothe them. To her surprise, Alex was already there, sitting in the dark. Did I wake you? She asked. No, haven't slept much lately. He looked at her swollen belly. Are they giving you trouble? They're restless tonight, like their father. Alex managed a small smile. He patted the piano bench beside him. Play? Something. It usually calms them down. Trinity sat and began to play a soft lullaby. Gradually, the babies settled. They know your music, Alex said softly. They know their mother's touch. The word mother hung in the air between them. According to their contract, Trinity wasn't supposed to be their mother. She was just the surrogate. But nothing was that simple anymore. Alex, she said carefully, what are we going to do? Before he could answer, Mrs. Rodriguez burst in. Mr. Sterling, come quick. There's been a break-in at the office. They rushed to Alex's study. The safe was open, papers scattered everywhere. The evidence, Alex whispered. Everything we had on Miranda it's gone. Trinity felt cold. Who could have? Alexandra. Alex's voice was like ice. She has a key. She's the only one besides me who knows the combination. As if on cue, his phone rang. It was Miranda. Missing something, darling. Her voice purred through the speaker. Now let's talk about a real settlement. Unless you want the board to see exactly how you handled the Maxwell merger. Alex's face went white. You wouldn't dare. Try me. Oh, and Alex, your little surrogate might want to pack her bags. Once the board sees this, you won't be able to afford her contract anymore. The line went dead. What was in those papers? Trinity asked. Proof that Miranda embezzled millions during our marriage, Alex said heavily. And now, Now she has proof that I covered it up to protect the company's reputation. Can she really destroy you with this? She can try. Alex's jaw set in a familiar, stubborn line. But she's forgetting something. What's that? I'm not the same man I was 3 years ago. He turned to James. Call the board. Emergency meeting first thing tomorrow. Alex, think about this, James pleaded. I'm done thinking. I'm done playing games. Alex took Trinity's hand. I'm done letting fear rule my life. The next morning, Trinity watched from the back of the Sterling Industries boardroom as Alex stood to address the board. Miranda sat near the front, smirking. 3 years ago, Alex began, I made a mistake. I covered up a crime to protect this company's reputation. I was wrong. Murmurs filled the room. Miranda's smirk faltered. I have here, Alex continued, pulling out a flash drive, complete records of every illegal transaction Miranda Sterling made while serving as CFO. Yes, I covered it up. Then, but I also kept copies of everything. You're bluffing, Miranda snapped. Am I? Alex smiled coldly. I also have proof that you've been working with Chinese competitors, selling company secrets. Did you really think I wouldn't have you watched after last time? The blood drained from Miranda's face. So here's what's going to happen, Alex continued. You're going to sign the divorce papers, the correct ones this time. You're going to drop all claims to my children, and you're going to disappear. Or everything goes to the SEC. You'll go down with me, Miranda hissed. Maybe, but I'm willing to risk that, are you? The boardroom erupted in chaos. Through it all, Trinity watched Alex, standing tall, unafraid, nothing like the cold businessman who had hired her months ago. Hours later, it was done. Miranda signed the papers and walked out of their lives, her designer heels clicking angrily on the marble floor. Back at the mansion, Trinity found Alex in his study, looking drained but relieved. You risked everything, she said softly. Not everything. He looked at her rounded belly. Just money and reputation. I've learned there are more important things. Like what? Instead of answering, Alex crossed the room and kissed her. Trinity melted into his arms as all the feelings they'd been fighting finally broke free. When they finally parted, Alex rested, his forehead against hers. Like love, he whispered. Like family. Like you. The babies chose that moment to kick hard, making them both laugh. But their happiness was short-lived. Neither of them saw Alexandra watching from the doorway, her face twisted with rage. You think this is over, dear brother, she muttered. Just wait until you see what I have planned. At 7 months pregnant with triplets, Trinity felt like she could barely move. Dr. Morgan had put her on bed rest, worried about her rising blood pressure. The only relief she got was her daily hour at the piano, which Alex insisted she keep. The babies need their music, he'd say, helping her to the bench each evening. Their relationship had changed since the kiss. Alex no longer pretended this was just business. He attended every doctor's appointment, had the nursery painted in soft yellows and greens, and spent evenings reading pregnancy books aloud while Trinity played piano. But Alexandra's strange behavior cast a shadow over their happiness. Something's not right, Trinity told James one afternoon. She's being nice. It was true. Alexandra had suddenly become the perfect sister-in-law, bringing Trinity healthy smoothies, offering pregnancy advice, and even defending her to gossiping society women. Maybe she's accepted the situation, James suggested, but he didn't sound convinced. The answer came one morning when Trinity took her first sip of Alexandra's daily smoothie. The taste was off, bitter, chemical. She immediately spit it out and called Dr. Morgan. The test results came back positive for a dangerous herb known to induce labor. When Alex found out, his rage was terrifying to witness. He confronted Alexandra in his study, but she just laughed. Prove it was me, she taunted. Prove anything. I learned from the best big brother. Remember who taught me about leaving no evidence? But she hadn't counted on Mrs. Rodriguez. The housekeeper had seen Alexandra adding something to the smoothie, and, suspicious, had recorded it on her phone. The video was damning. Alexandra was arrested but made bail immediately. That night, as Alex and Trinity lay in bed, she finally asked the question that had been bothering her. Why does she hate me so much? Alex was quiet for a long moment. It's not you she hates, it's me. He sighed heavily. When our mother died, I was 12 and Alexandra was 8. Our father changed, became cruel, demanding. I protected her as much as I could, took the brunt of his anger. But when he died, instead of being freed, I turned into him. Trinity took his hand. You're not like him. I was cold, unfeeling, using money and power to control everything and everyone. He touched her belly gently. Until them. So Alexandra thinks I've betrayed. Everything our father taught us. In her mind, love is weakness, feelings are liabilities. He laughed bitterly. I taught her that. The babies kicked, and Alex smiled, pressing his hand more firmly against Trinity's stomach. But they're teaching me something different, he whispered. The moment was shattered by the sound of breaking glass downstairs. Alex was immediately alert. Stay here, he ordered, reaching for his phone. But Trinity was already feeling it. Sharp pains, different from the usual kicks. Something was wrong. Alex, she gasped. The babies. His face went white. It's too early. Call Dr. Morgan. Everything after that was a blur of pain and fear. Trinity was vaguely aware of being carried downstairs, of James appearing with security guards, of Alex's voice demanding answers. At the hospital, Dr. Morgan's face was grim. The stress has triggered early labor, she explained. We need to do an emergency C-section. But it's too soon, Trinity cried. We don't have a choice. Your blood pressure is dangerously high. As they prepared Trinity for surgery, Alex never left her side. His face was calm, but his hands shook as he held hers. I'm scared, Trinity whispered. I know. Alex kissed her forehead. But you're the strongest person I know. You can do this. We can do this. Just then, James burst into the room. Alex, Alexandra's been spotted in the hospital. Security cameras. Caught her in a surgical scrubs disguise. She's here somewhere. Alex's jaw clenched. Find her now! But as they wheeled Trinity toward the operating room, all thoughts of Alexandra vanished. The pain was getting worse, and black spots danced at the edges of her vision. The last thing Trinity saw before the anesthesia took hold was Alex's face, his eyes filled with tears and love. Stay with me, he begged, and stay with us. Then everything went black. She didn't see the chaos that erupted in the operating room. Didn't see Alexandra burst in with a gun, demanding that security let her pass. Didn't see Alex step between his sister and the surgical team, pleading with her to stop. You're going to kill them, he shouted. Your own family. Family! Alexandra laughed wildly. You chose her over family. Over everything Father taught us. Father was wrong. Alex's voice broke. Can't you see that? Look what his teachings did to us. Turned us into monsters who can't feel, can't love. Love is weakness. No, Alex said softly. Love is what saved me. And it can save you too, Alexandra. Please, let me help you. Let me be the brother I should have been. The gun wavered in Alexandra's hand. Behind them, monitors began to beep urgently. We're losing her, Dr. Morgan shouted. We need to operate now. In that moment of distraction, James managed to tackle Alexandra. The gun went flying, security swarmed in, and Alex turned back to Trinity's unconscious form on the operating table. Please, he whispered, touching her face one last time before they pushed him out. Please don't leave me. In the waiting room, Alex Sterling, one of the most powerful men in New York, could do nothing but pray. The hours crawled by like years. James stayed with Alex, making calls to handle the press that had gathered outside. Police came to take statements about Alexandra, who was now in custody. She needs help, Alex said quietly. Real help this time. Not just money thrown at the problem. I'll make some calls, James promised. There's a good psychiatric facility upstate. Just then, Dr. Morgan appeared, still in her surgical scrubs. Alex jumped to his feet, his heart stopping at the sight of blood on her gown. They're alive, she said quickly, seeing his face. All of them. Alex's legs gave out. James helped him back to his chair. 2 girls and a boy, Dr. Morgan continued. They're very small, just over 3 pounds each, but they're fighters. They're in the NICU now. And Trinity? Dr. Morgan's face softened. She lost a lot of blood. There were complications, but she's stable. She's in recovery. When can I see them? Trinity needs rest, but you can see the babies now. Just prepare yourself. They're hooked up to a lot of machines. It looks scary, but it's all helping them. Alex followed Dr. Morgan to the NICU. Through the window, he saw 3 tiny incubators, each containing a miracle smaller than his hand. That's your son in the middle, Dr. Morgan said softly, and your daughters on either side. Alex pressed, his hand against the glass, tears running down his face. They're so small, but they're strong just like their mother. After being scrubbed and gowned, Alex was allowed to touch them. He couldn't hold them yet. They were too fragile, but he could put his hand in the incubator, let their tiny fingers grip his. "Hello, little ones," he whispered. "I'm your daddy." The baby girl on the left grabbed his finger with surprising strength. The boy hiccuped in his sleep, and the girl on the right opened her eyes exactly like Trinity's. "They need names," a weak voice said from behind him. Alex turned to see Trinity in a wheelchair, pale but alive, being pushed by a nurse. "You should be resting," he scolded, but his voice broke with joy. "I needed to see them." Trinity reached into the nearest incubator, touching their daughter's hand. "They're perfect. What should we call them?" Trinity smiled. "The boy in the middle, Richard." Alex stiffened. "After my father. After the man who gave me you," Trinity said softly. "Whatever his faults, I owe him that." Alex's heart swelled. "The girls?" "Hope," Trinity said, touching the baby who had Alex's eyes. "Because she gave us hope for something more than a business deal." "And faith," Alex added, looking at the strong one who still gripped his finger. "Because it took faith to trust each other." "Faith, Hope, and Richard Sterling," Trinity whispered. "Our miracles." Over the next few weeks, the babies grew stronger. Trinity recovered, though she had to stay in the hospital for observation. Alex split his time between the NICU, Trinity's room, and dealing with the aftermath of Alexandra's actions. Alexandra had been admitted to the psychiatric facility upstate. Her breakdown had revealed years of trauma and pain that had never been properly addressed. "She's asking to see you," James told Alex one evening. Alex looked at Trinity, who nodded. "Go. She's still your sister." He found Alexandra sitting by a window, looking smaller and younger without her fancy clothes and makeup. "I'm sorry," she whispered when she saw him. I couldn't, I know." Alex took her hand. "I'm sorry too. I should have protected you better. Should have shown you there was another way to live. Will they let me see them someday?" "The babies? When you're better. They're your family too." Alexandra started to cry. Real tears, not the manipulative ones she'd learned from their father. Alex held her as she sobbed, finally grieving for the childhood they'd both lost. Back at the hospital, Trinity was playing a lullaby on a small keyboard Alex had brought her. All three babies seemed to respond to the music, their vital signs, growing stronger and steadier. "They know their mother's music," the NICU nurse said with a smile. Mother. The word no longer scared Trinity. This wasn't about contracts or deals anymore. This was about love, pure and simple and stronger than any business arrangement. When Alex returned, his eyes were red, but peaceful. "Alexandra?" Trinity asked, taking her first steps toward healing. He sat beside her. "Like we all are." Trinity leaned against him, watching their children sleep. "Who would have thought? That rainy night when you found me on the street. I thought I was looking for an heir," Alex said, kissing her temple. "Instead, I found a family." Through the NICU window, the sun broke through the clouds, bathing the babies in golden light. Faith waved her tiny fists. Hope opened her eyes. And Richard made a sound that might have been a laugh. "My father always said love was a weakness," Alex mused. "But look at what love created." Trinity played another note on the keyboard, and all three babies turned toward the sound. "Love isn't weak," she said softly. "Love is what makes us strong enough to change." Above them, monitors beeped steadily, marking the rhythm of 4 tiny heartbeats, 3 new lives, and one that had started beating again the moment a limousine stopped at a red light on a rainy night in Manhattan. But their story wasn't over. Yet, in fact, in many ways, it was just beginning. After 6 long weeks in the NICU, the triplets were finally strong enough to go home. Trinity had been discharged earlier, but spent every day at the hospital, playing music for the babies and learning how to care for them from the nurses. The day they brought Faith, Hope, and Richard home, the Sterling mansion was transformed. The formal living room now held 3 bassinets. The pristine kitchen counter was covered with bottles and formula, and the sound of classical music mixed with lullabies filled every room. "It's like a different house," Mrs. Rodriguez said, smiling as she helped Trinity organize the baby's supplies. "It's a home now," Trinity replied. Alex had taken a month off work to help with the babies, something that shocked his board of directors, but delighted James. "Never thought I'd see the day," James teased, watching Alex change Richard's diaper with surprising skill. "Alex Sterling, domestic dad. Laugh all you want," Alex said, dodging as Richard picked that moment to demonstrate his remarkable aim. "But I've never been happier." The babies each had their own personalities already. Faith was the leader, always awake first and demanding attention. Hope was the quiet observer, taking everything in with her serious eyes, and Richard was the charmer, already smiling and cooing at everyone who came near. One night, as Trinity played the piano with Hope sleeping against her chest, Alex came in with a strange expression on his face. "What is it?" Trinity asked. "I just got off the phone with Alexandra's doctors." He sat beside her on the piano bench. "She's doing better, much better. They think she might be ready for supervised visits soon." Trinity's hands stilled on the keys. "How do you feel about that?" "Scared, hopeful." Alex touched Hope's curly hair. "She's my sister, and they're her family too." "Then we'll make it work," Trinity said simply. The next few weeks fell into a routine. Trinity played piano for the babies every morning, swearing it helped them eat better. Alex read them bedtime stories every night, doing different voices that made Trinity laugh. And during the day, they tag-teamed diaper changes, feedings, and the constant laundry 3 newborns created. But something was bothering Trinity. She noticed Alex taking long phone calls in his study, having whispered conversations with James, and disappearing for hours at a time. "He's not," she started to ask James one day, her old insecurities surfacing. "Trust me," James interrupted, with a knowing smile. "Whatever you're thinking, you're wrong." The mystery was solved on a sunny Saturday morning. Alex insisted on dressing the babies in special outfits, tiny suits for Richard and Faith, who hated dresses, and a frilly dress for Hope, who loved them. "What's going on?" Trinity asked as Alex helped her into the car, the babies secure in their car seats. "You'll see." They drove to Central Park, to the spot where Trinity used to play her keyboard for spare change. But now, instead of a dirty sidewalk, there was a white carpet laid out. Instead of hurrying strangers, there were rows of chairs filled with smiling faces. And instead of her old keyboard, there was a beautiful white piano. "Alex," Trinity whispered. He helped her out of the car, took her hand, and led her to the piano. "This is where I found you," he said softly, "where our story began. And this is where I want to start our next chapter." He got down on one knee. "Trinity Washington, you came into my life as a business arrangement, but you showed me that real wealth isn't in bank accounts or boardrooms. It's in the sound of our children's laughter, in the music you play, in the love you've taught me to feel again." He pulled out a ring, not a flashy diamond, but a simple band with musical notes engraved around it. "Will you marry me? Not for business, not for the babies, but because I love you more than I ever thought possible." Trinity looked at their babies now being held by a beaming James and Mrs. Rodriguez. She looked at the gathering of friends, real friends, not society people. She even saw Alexandra, accompanied by her doctors, smiling tentatively from the back row. Then she looked at Alex, the man who had started as her savior, become her children's father, and somehow turned into the love of her life. She sat at the piano, placed her fingers on the keys, and began to play. Not a classical piece or a lullaby, but the song that had caught Alex's attention that rainy night so long ago. As the last note faded, she turned to him and smiled. "Yes," she said. 1,000 times, yes." The park erupted in cheers. The babies, startled by the noise, began to cry in perfect 3-part harmony, and Alex kissed Trinity right there beside the piano, neither of them caring who saw. Later that night, as they sat in the nursery watching their children sleep, Trinity asked, "Do you ever regret it, stopping your car that night?" Alex pulled her closer. "Only one regret." "What's that?" "That I ever thought of it as a business deal, that I didn't know right away what kind of miracle I'd found." From their cribs, the triplets sighed in their sleep. Faith reached out and grabbed Hope's hand. Hope held onto Richard's blanket, and Richard smiled in his dreams. "Look at them," Trinity whispered, "already taking care of each other." "Like their mother taught them," Alex said. But there was still one more surprise coming, one that would test their newfound happiness in ways they never expected. The morning of Trinity and Alex's wedding dawned bright and clear. The Sterling Mansion's gardens were transformed with white flowers and twinkling lights. At 6 months old, the triplets were healthy and strong, dressed in matching outfits for their parents' big day. But as Trinity stood in her dressing room, adjusting her simple but elegant white gown, Mrs. Rodriguez burst in with a worried look. "Miss Trinity," she said breathlessly, "there's someone here to see you, says she's your mother." Trinity's heart stopped. "That's impossible. My mother died 5 years ago." "Then you have some explaining to do, baby girl," said a familiar voice from the doorway. Trinity turned to see an older woman in a wheelchair. thinner and grayer than she remembered, but unmistakably her mother, Sarah Washington. "Mama," Trinity whispered. "But how?" "The cancer went into remission," Sarah explained. "But by then, you'd disappeared. I've been searching for you ever since. Then I saw your picture in the society pages. My little girl, marrying Alex Sterling." Trinity fell to her knees beside the wheelchair, tears streaming down her face. "I thought you were gone. The hospital said there was a mix-up with another patient's records." Sarah touched Trinity's face. "Oh, baby girl, what you must have been through." Their tearful reunion was interrupted by the sound of babies crying. "Are those my grandbabies I hear?" Sarah asked with a smile. The door opened and Alex came in with Faith and Hope, while James followed with Richard. "Trinity, the babies are getting fussy." "Oh," Alex stopped short at the sight of Sarah. "So you're the man who saved my daughter," Sarah said, studying him. "Actually," Alex said quietly, "she saved me." The wedding was delayed for an hour, while Trinity and Sarah caught up, and the triplets got to know their grandmother. Sarah held each baby, tears rolling down her face, as she sang them the same gospel song she used to sing to Trinity. Finally, it was time. But as Trinity prepared to walk down the aisle, there was one more surprise. Alexandra appeared, looking healthy and clear-eyed after months of treatment. "I know I don't deserve to be here," she said softly, "but I'd like to play something, and if that's okay." She sat at the piano and began to play, the same song Trinity had played the night Alex found her, but arranged as a wedding march. Trinity walked down the aisle on James's arm, at his insistence, past Sarah in her wheelchair holding Hope, past Mrs. Rodriguez with Faith, past the family and friends who had become so much more than employees or business associates. Alex waited, under an arch of white roses, holding Richard, who was trying to eat his father's boutonniere. When he saw Trinity, his eyes filled with tears. The ceremony was simple but meaningful. They wrote their own vows, speaking from the heart about the unexpected journey that had brought them together. "I thought I was offering you a business deal," Alex said, his voice rough with emotion. "Instead, you offered me a life filled with love, music, and more joy than I ever thought possible." "You gave me shelter from the rain," Trinity replied. "But more than that, you gave me the chance to be myself, not just a survivor, but a mother, a musician, and now, your wife." As they exchanged rings, the babies decided to join in. Faith squealed happily, Hope clapped her tiny hands, and Richard let out a laugh that made everyone smile. "By the power vested in me," the minister said with a grin, "I now pronounce you husband and wife, and officially declare you a family." The reception was a blend of their worlds, classical music and gospel, champagne and soul food, society friends, and Trinity's old music teachers from Juilliard. Alexandra played a special piece she had composed for the triplets, while Sarah shared embarrassing stories about Trinity's childhood. Late in the evening, Alex found Trinity at the piano, playing softly while their children slept in a nearby playpen. "Happy?" he asked, sitting beside her. "More than I ever dreamed possible." She smiled at their sleeping babies. "Look at them." Faith, holding Hope's hand, Hope touching Richard's arm. "Always connected," Alex mused. "Like their mother taught them. Like we all learned together," Trinity corrected. Just then, Sarah wheeled over. "Mind if I join you?" Trinity moved over, and her mother's fingers found the keys, shaky but still skilled. Together, mother and daughter played the song that had started everything, while Alex held their sleeping children. Faith, Hope, and Richard sighed contentedly in their sleep, safe in their father's arms. Alexandra watched from nearby, at peace, with herself for the first time in years. James and Mrs. Rodriguez danced slowly, both pretending they weren't falling in love. And outside, the same stars that had witnessed a desperate deal between two strangers now shone down on a family bound together by love, music, and the kind of miracles that only happen when you're brave enough to open your heart. "You know what's funny?" Trinity said later that night as she and Alex danced under the stars. "That contract we signed, it's not worth the paper it's printed on anymore." "No," Alex agreed, pulling her closer. "It's worth so much more." Above them, a shooting star streaked across the sky. In the distance, a piano played softly. And in their playpen, 3 miracle babies slept peacefully, dreaming of the music that had brought their parents together and the love that would guide their family's future. For this was no longer a business arrangement, but a love story, one that had transformed not just 2 lives but an entire family. And as Trinity and Alex shared one more kiss under the starlit sky, they knew that their greatest adventures were still to come. After all, raising triplets was going to be quite a journey, but this time they would face it together with love, laughter, and always, always music. The end.